guys, I'm Bill Blair, and glad to be back with you. I'm a youth minister at Oxford University United Methodist Church, and I also run an outdoor coaching company called Rocks to Rivers. Today we're having conversations about relationships, chiefly about how to transition in relationships, ending a relationship, and how to end on a good note. So I got some great friends with me here today. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, starting on my right, and go around, and then we'll jump into the conversation.
Hi, I'm Thomas.
Hey, I'm Cassidy.
I'm Avery.
Hi, I'm Elliot.
I'm Emory.
Awesome. Well, you guys, what for you is the qualities of a good relationship? What are qualities you're looking for going into a relationship? Because usually that's where we build our expectations. So I'm curious if you could kind of feed the conversation with that. Everybody give at least one. What's a quality of a good relationship?
Loyalty.
Loyalty. Okay.
Say, at least the foundations of common interests that can be built upon.
Trust.
Yeah.
Trust.
I like feeling comfortable. Just can be yourself around.
Yeah.
I feel like you should build each other up, kind of support
Yeah.
each other, make each other better. It's kind of the vibe.
Wow. That's good. All right. So loyalty, make each other better, trust. What were the other ones?
Feeling comfortable.
Feeling comfortable.
Common interests.
Common interests. That's good. That's good foundational. Anything else?
I think feeling comfortable is important because it makes me think about, I feel like in high school especially, we put on like fronts of who we want to be perceived as instead of like who we are and stuff. And like, I feel like some people can do that. I know I've done that when I was younger. And I think just having somebody really know you and like accept you for who you are is really important.
Yeah. That is definitely. Would you say that's also the foundation of friendship?
Yes,
So
definitely.
let's,
For sure.
So let's hinge on that. You know, if friendship, I understand people get into relationships for lots of different reasons,
Right.
and that's okay. You know, non-judgmentally. But if friendship is a qualifier for a relationship, and that relationship has to transition or has to end, what is it about friendship that gives it the enduringness that you guys are talking about?
I guess like just empathy between each other and like being able to understand that whatever the other person is feeling is important and is okay the same way whatever you're feeling is important and okay, and that it doesn't always have to do with like the other person doing something wrong. It's just like sometimes things don't work out, and like being able to understand that that's not coming from a bad or like a negative, I don't know how to say that, like coming from a bad place. Well, how do you say that? You know, like it's not from the other person being mean.
Like bad intentions.
Bad intentions.
That's good, yeah.
Yes. If they can have good intentions while breaking off a friendship, and like it's important that you can understand that.
Yeah. Give me an example where a transition in relationship has gone well.
The transition of a friendship into a relationship?
Yeah, sometimes, you know, we can talk about the offboarding of a relationship, kind of like if you're dating or something like that, and then you decide that you want to dissolve that. That's one way, but I think we got to talk about the way in to better understand the way out.
True.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So let's talk about onboarding the relationship. How does it get to that next place? What are things that we do as people to help build that trust, build that loyalty, all the things you mentioned, the commonalities? What are those things that we do to build those?
You start spending all of your time together.
Yeah, for real.
Basically.
Yeah.
That's a big one. Time. Yeah. What else?
I think there's also a downside to that. Like, you don't want your entire life to be that person because then you don't want to. There is like depending on someone, but then there's also like codependency, like needing them more than what's healthy, you
Yes.
know? But I think going back to what you were saying, that it's probably good to start as friends because you act like relationships are kind of like a more serious step, because I feel like friendships, you are in that relationship with that person because you just want to be around them. Like, you don't gain anything by having them in your life other than the sheer joy that you get from spending time with them. And I feel like in more like serious relationships like dating and stuff, there's also a physical aspect. There's also other reasons people can be in that relationship. It doesn't necessarily just have to be for your company, you know.
That's good. I like the way you said that. Yeah, for just the exclusive joy of being with that person. That's cool. That's really cool.
Another way I think that a friendship ends up being a relationship is definitely when you start to like tell them things that maybe you're not always telling everybody else because you're scared of what they'll think. Like once again, going back to being comfortable, you're just allowed to say whatever you want with that person.
So
And I
like a
think-
transparency,
Right, yeah.
vulnerability.
Vulnerability, great word.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Man, you're right.
I always feel like that transition though, from like friends to trying to make it like a relationship in a romantic way is always messy. Because there's lines and you have to like slowly walk over each one and make sure that the other person is wanting the same thing out of it as you. And at some point you have to sit down and have like a conversation with them about
Yeah, you do.
what is going on, what's like the goal, instead of like, 'cause there's a point when you know you're not just regular friends, because there's a different connection, there's a different interaction
Mutual
you have.
understanding, like, hey, maybe something more is going on, and it's I'd say it's most definitely the scariest part after you're going into a relationship based off of a friendship, because there's so much at stake. Because if you maybe cross a line that person wasn't comfortable with, you just worry about, oh, did I just ruin a friendship, like a really good friend that I've had, which is just risky, but
That's good.
I mean, for a long time, I would do like the game, when you're friends and you're slowly like, trying to get more and more comfortable and see how the other person feels. But that ends poorly very often. And I found a lot more success being very upfront. If like when I'm friends with somebody, there was this girl that I liked, and I was friends with her, and I was very like upfront, like, hey, I think I'm feeling something that's more than just a friendship. Would you be willing to explore that? And she said no, and I was like, okay, cool. And there was no like bad blood, and we're still really close friends. It's not a big deal.
Yeah, I think being upfront is honestly the best thing. Being like, this is what I want, even if, like, I know we're talking about friendships, but even if you're not necessarily friends or something with a person, but just saying like, hey, this is what I'm looking for, this is what I want, because there are different types of relationships. There are different reasons people have for getting into a relationship. So being like, well, I want to be in a relationship, but I don't want anything physical, or I want to be in a relationship, but I want to be like friends with benefits. Like being upfront about what you want, I feel like is the healthiest and best way to do it, like Thomas was saying. And it can simplify things so much, and then it can also protect your feelings too, in a way. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I personally, like, I can't see myself ever being in a relationship without, like, going into a friendship with no intentions of having a relationship. Like, I will never just go up to someone and be like, I want a relationship. There has to be an element of, like, true friendship before. And as for, like, what happens after, like, I think it's healthy. Like, you're going to get your heart broken in life. Like, it happens. Like, it's going to happen to everyone. It's like, it's a part of living and being a human. So I don't think there's any way to cushion that fall. I think it's just going to happen.
I think there's also, I don't know, like kind of, definitely doesn't feel like it, but there is some beauty in getting your heart broken, because that means you really cared. That means you really did put in effort. Like I think the more it hurts, the more real it was for you. And I think that's pretty cool that we can like feel those emotions. And even if it doesn't have necessarily like the ending that we expected, it still showed we have the ability to love others. And I think that's a really powerful thing.
very important, especially being younger, teenagers, when a lot of the times your feelings can be like invalidated, and then something ends up like that, and you're like, wow, I really truly care for this person, and it just like shows you how raw emotions can be, no matter what age you are.
Exactly, yeah.
Wow. That's well said.
I mean, I personally agree with, you know, our feelings being invalidated to a certain point. Because
Tell me more. I want to hear more about this. Yeah.
I mean, I look back on decisions I made I'm 18 now, but like as a 13, 14-year-old, when it comes to relationships and friendships, and it's just like, come on, man, I should have listened to my parents. Like, Like, you know, I agree. Like, our feelings do get invalidated, but I feel like it's definitely a good thing sometimes.
Right.
Yeah. 'Cause
So when you, I'm just curious if you could qualify. When you say invalidated, do I hear you guys meaning they're not reciprocated?
No,
Or
no,
what
no.
do you guys
I mean more
No
as in
one-
like,
No one recognizes
like
the
if
fact that we are feeling these emotions.
you truly
Wow.
like someone and maybe an adult is like, oh, that's just a little
Oh, you
high
guys are so
school
cute.
They downplay
banter.
it.
Yeah, and like
Oh,
even if it
wow.
is just like a little like, from an outside perspective, there's so much going on in the world. A little high school relationship might not be something huge to like your parents or a friend of a friend, but to you it can like be something very important, and
Yeah.
that can sometimes be downplayed just because the vastness of everything.
I'm really glad y'all said
As
that.
as you get older,
You look
your
back.
your
and you're
mindset
like,
shifts to
You're
that
like,
was nothing in the grand
Yeah.
scheme of
Right.
things. So at the
At the
time,
time,
it's
yeah.
everything. But then, you know, a year, 6 months even later, you're like, what am I doing? Like, it
Right.
doesn't matter, you know?
Right,
Life
right.
goes on.
But that definitely, I think that happens a lot when relationships or friendships end, because usually you're really sad, or like you can be really sad if your
Sure.
relationship ends, and then adults or even like our peers, you know, like our friends can be like, oh, well, you're just being dramatic, you know, like
Yes.
you don't need to cry about that, like it's not that big of a deal, you'll find somebody else next week. And I think that just makes it suck even more, because that's when you are being really vulnerable and you're looking for that friendship that you can't necessarily get out of your partner that you usually get it from, and then you just feel alone. So
Wow.
And I think that, I don't know, I feel like we're not really allowed to still feel lingering effects. Like, just because maybe you're not, like, you were in a relationship and then it ended, that doesn't mean that you still can't miss them or miss the feelings, how they made you feel, or how you felt in that relationship. Even when it's been months and you think that you're past it, that doesn't mean that your heart has fully recovered. Like, I remember my first relationship, like, I would still find things, and then, like, a memory would be, like, re-unlocked or resurfaced or something, and I'd get really sad, and I felt like I couldn't allow myself to feel that because it had been so long since then, you know.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, it's true. It's true. Those memories are there, and the emotions attached to those memories are there, and they are completely valid, and they are completely real. And you're right. I feel like what I hear you guys saying is some people are they're rushing us along and not validating really the feelings that were there. Even if in the grand scheme of things, you know, you feel like it's not as big later in retrospect, but they were still real. They were still very real.
Yeah. I think living in the moment, like, you know, appreciate what you have. And when it's gone, like, you know, you're going to miss them, obviously, but you being sad is not going to do anything. Like, you have to go out and make new experiences on your own. Like, you know, you're still the same person you're always going to be. Like, nothing changes about your morals, anything about you when a person leaves your life. Like,
Or your worth.
yeah.
Your worth. That's good. That's really good.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why endings of relationships can be hard, because of course in a relationship between two people, either person has complete right to end the said relationship when they want to for a reason, and it doesn't have to feel fair, but they do have the right to do that. But I think we kind of feel like when people leave our lives that we are not worthy of other people. It's kind of like, oh, did I do something wrong? Like, was I not enough? When really it's just kind of like, what was going on? And that can be different for some relationships. Obviously, like abusive ones especially, like it can be the other person. But I think for the most part, it usually is like, what was going on with them kind of has nothing to do with you. And sometimes you just can't help that. And it just like maybe they're just not ready for a relationship, and they have every right to not be, you know?
Especially if it's a relationship coming out of a friendship, because if you had gotten into a relationship with someone that you really, really cared about, the last thing that you want is for them to feel uncomfortable. And if they get into a relationship with you and say, I'm like, this isn't what I want, then you just have to, like, it sucks, but it's just like, it's just like at the end of the day, like, I don't know, you still care about that person, and you want them to be happy, even if it kind of stinks for you, but, like, still know that you're not holding them down and letting them live life.
And sometimes you don't want them to be happy. Sometimes you want to be mad.
Yeah.
And that's totally valid.
But you don't
normal.
have to do anything about it.
Yeah.
You don't have to make
Then
them
you-
Let's not
unhappy.
key their car. or
Yeah,
something.
right.
Yeah.
You can hope that it happens, but don't do it yourself.
Have y'all
Yeah,
have
of
y'all ever
course.
seen Mean Girls?
Yes. Yes.
It's like like when they're thinking about the girl getting hit by the bus.
Yeah.
Not that I approve of that.
Not
but
to
yeah.
endorse it.
No, but I think there are some ways. I think our hearts, and you've kind of segued great into the second piece of this, but our hearts in relationship want reconciliation of some type. They want, our minds are made for story. And when the story does not end or progress the way that we thought, either we have to reframe it, or sometimes we internalize it. There's all kinds of ways we can go. It's kind of like coming to a 10-way stop, and you can decide which ways you want to go. And so let's talk about that. Let's enter that part of the conversation. When you're at that crossroads in a relationship, and it's not going to be an immediate thing. I mean, I'm sure some relationships kind of do stop very abruptly, and some people just shut down and shut off and go a different direction. I know that happens. But if we're talking about how to end things well, when either the fire has died out or it's just you guys feel like you're going in different directions, let's talk about how to create a path that is helpful for one another without being codependent. I love the fact that you brought that up. We don't just have to make sure the other person's fine, but we do have to own our part. I think that's a big part of it. So as you're coming to that intersection, as you're thinking about that in your stories, what are some ways you feel like you would hope it would go for people?
I like to think, I feel like the ideal would be that you can end your relationship and still be friends and still care about each other, but in reality that's really hard to do, I think, especially right after you break up, and that space is really important. And remembering how to be your own person again without telling your partner everything that you're doing that day, or like letting them know where you are all the time or something like maybe you'd be used to. So I think space is really important before you get back into checking on them once in a while and stuff. Space.
Space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think just making sure, especially if you're the one ending the relationship, because chances are, in a perfect world, it would be like a nice, good, mutual breakup. And we take some time, and then we're friends, but we're not close friends necessarily, and it's just nice. But that's not how life works most of the time. So I think just making sure the other person, you give them closure. Because sometimes it's been over for the person who's ended the relationship longer than it has been for the person who the relationship is ending, like right as they're having that conversation.
Right.
So I think planning out what you're going to say is very important. Planning out like a good time to say it. Maybe not right before they go to school or something, or go to like a job interview, like sometime where they have time to like reflect and, be in their own and whatever they need to do. And also be like, allow them to also speak too.
Yes.
Because even though it's not like reconciliation, you still like we're in a relationship with this person, and you still care about them to the extent that you want them to be able to move on in a healthy way.
That's well said.
Thank you.
Well,
Well, we're on the subject.
I think that also, like before, if you're the person that's doing the breaking up, it's important to remember how the other person's feeling. Put yourself in their shoes. Imagine how would I feel if somebody who I loved so much, like, just told me they didn't feel the same way. Because I think a lot of the times breakups happen where they're just like, hey, I'm breaking up with you, I don't feel good, this is why, goodbye. And I think that remembering, like, well, they're going to have questions, you know, like the closure thing, but also just being a decent person, you know, letting them be upset if they're going to be upset and stuff, because I feel like breakups can turn into arguments really fast instead of a civil conversation.
Definitely.
And it's best to avoid that, you know, if you want to end on a good note.
And especially if you're the person getting broken up with, I think it's important to remember, like, obviously you're going through so many emotions in that moment, but also knowing in the future, as long as, like, you getting closure is very important, but you shouldn't hurt people or yourself in the process of that. So, like, do what you need to do, take some time. You can hate the person, you can be mad at them, you can say, like, oh, like, I never want to see them again. You can yell at, like, the top of, like, a rooftop or something, I don't know, to each their own. But, you know, just don't key their car. Don't do something you're going to regret.
And I feel like you don't need the closure. Like, even if you feel like that's going to be your missing piece, like, that's what's going to heal you, oftentimes that's just what you're telling yourself to give yourself comfort. And not every partner who breaks up with you owes you that closure. Sure, it'd be nice if that happened every time, but you can move on. And I think that it's important to remember that you can move on without getting closure, and you're going to be okay. And time heals, and, you know.
Time does heal. Sometimes it really does take time. Over Christmas break, I was thinking about, I was at my cousin's house, and we were watching The Office, actually. And it was a show in one of my past relationships that was like our show that we watched together. And after we broke up, it was a very toxic relationship. I was never able to watch that show for years. Like, I couldn't even look at it without it, like, bringing back, like, trauma and memories. And then I just found myself watching The Office, and I was like, oh, like, that's, you know, like, that's nice. Like, I can enjoy it. I can, like, laugh. And that was something I hadn't been able to do for a while with that show. You know, like, time does heal, and allowing yourself to grow and heal, it's amazing what time can do.
Wow.
I feel like as you, like, progress in a relationship, you, like, that person, like, you can associate that person with objects or things or a show or something, and after a relationship ends, it's going to take a lot of time for that to kind of fade away, and it is best done naturally. Just kind of let it do its thing. If you were to sit down and watch that show and you'd be like, hey, I'm not ready for this, then put it away, save it for another day.
I think just, like, making new memories, you know, like, if you just sit in bed all day all sad, that's going to be the last thing you remember, you know. If you're going out, having fun, like genuine fun with other people who you have deep connections with, you're going to have those memories instead. And it's going to take that much longer for your brain to rewind to the bad memories, because you got the good memories, like, you know, fresh in your mind.
That's right.
So I think that's important.
Yeah, it's a tradition in my friend group, that whenever any of us gets broken up with, we all get together. We watch Click by Adam Sandler.
There you go.
Because it's such a bad movie. But now, when I think back on my breakups, I almost laugh. Because I think about, like, 6 dudes watching Adam Sandler crying over Click.
That's good stuff.
And I completely agree. Making a new memory and not just kind of wallowing in your sadness.
Yeah.
And you can be sad together, but now it's like a fun,
If
funny,
you're sad
happy
with
memory.
people,
Yeah.
you at least that can't be all-consuming, you know?
Exactly.
There are other aspects to life when you're with other people, so.
I also think, I don't think this is for everyone, but, like, in time, like, at your own pace, of course. I think it's also nice, you know, when you, like, get a crush on somebody or start dating someone else, and it kind of is like, wow, like, it's not, this person wasn't the end-all, be-all. Like, this wasn't
100%.
the last person. Like, this wasn't, stuff seems less devastating when you're moving on, you know, and it doesn't have to end well. Like that, the next person you date does not have to be the person that you end up with, but it can just, you know, it's nice to know, like, I can still have feelings for other people. I'm not, even though, like, I still miss this person, I'm not, like, I'm okay in some way.
That's good. You guys are bringing up some really good points. Some of them remind me of this movie Inside Out. Did y'all ever see Inside Out?
Yeah.
So, long story short, in the movie Inside Out, a girl moves to a new town, and she's going through grief, and she's sad, and, you know, her parents are trying to figure out life there, and they're kind of fighting about it, and she feels alone in her experience. And, you know, as she's trying to walk through it and work through it, she has to take a journey of sadness. And there are characters in her body and in her mind. And the entire time, happiness is trying to keep sadness from being sad and always trying to liven her back up. But the whole point of the movie is that an emotion has to run its course. And that is like its wired way of being able to heal and grow. And so, you know, especially in our culture, we kind of have this, you know, like, all right, let's pull the tissue papers out and wipe the tears away, and let's, you know, put a smile on, and let's go get the world. Fast forward into, you know, like y'all's age or older, and it's like, yeah, just go hook up with somebody else. Get over that situation, and let's move on. But one thing that you guys mentioned that I think is important in this equation is attachments. I think you're right. New memories with friends, new, you know, going to see Click together, things like that, where you've just gone through a detachment and all of the things that might be in there. And I love what you said about, like, for some people it may have started way before the actual conversation of detachment. There's a need in a relationship, there's a deep need for other relationships in order to navigate that to the next place. You know, we are who we are on our own, and we are who we are in community. And so, in a sense, we have to have both of those. We have to let our grief run its course if we're the person who's struggling with those feelings. And we have to be open if we're going to be renewed and continue to walk into our fullness. We also have to be open to the other relationships in our lives that can help us move into that. And so I love what you brought up about your buddies getting together, and I love what you brought up about the memories, all very potent things. So in a non-ideal world that we actually live in, when things don't work out, what is one thing you guys can do when the relationship does not work out that you feel is going to be a helpful way of moving forward? Maybe you can't help the other party, maybe you can, but what is one way you can move forward in a healthy way?
Well, I think at the beginning of the breakup, it's important to distract yourself, but with positive things, you know. Definitely healthy coping mechanisms are better than unhealthy. And one of those things that I do personally is just throw my time into a new, like, hobby or studying or something, you know, and, like, because it makes me feel like I have purpose again.
Wow, yeah.
And so whether that be getting good grades or getting good at an instrument or something, just making sure that I fill up my time with something that is fulfilling and not just, like, watching TV. It's okay if you want to watch TV, but I just know that makes me feel better and, like, productive.
That's good.
So I'd say set goals.
I thought you said sex real quick. You know sex, lots of sex. Okay,
That helps too. But I said set goals.
Set goals.
Not the other thing. Yeah, I mean, just like giving yourself a reason to get out of bed every morning, you know? Like,
yeah, dude.
You want to have something that, like, you know, motivates you and gives you purpose, and like she said, and then work toward those goals and put instead of being dependent, which you shouldn't be in the relationship in the first place, but instead of being dependent, you know, you should pursue other things with that same tenacity that you put in the relationship.
That's good. Thank you.
Mine's gonna go completely against what Cassidy said.
That's okay. There's space for that here. Yeah, good.
For me personally, I just, obviously not for a long time, but I just kind of let myself be sad, because a lot of times I feel like just in our day and age, it's very, what you said, like, get the tissues, put a smile on, do this. And while I think that's good of, like, obviously you don't want to be, like, in shambles walking into school every morning, but, like, if you have some alone time and you need some alone time, make that, like, clear, maybe to family or friends, that you just, like, need some time to process and some time to regroup yourself and be certain in yourself before you're presenting to others that you are certain in yourself.
Wow.
I think that's a slippery slope, though, because
It is a
that could turn into being in your bed for months and not doing anything.
True.
And there's no way to regulate that without other people, telling you to get up and go do so. I think I'm kind of in the philosophy of make your sad friends get out and do stuff with you. That's what I do.
Sorry, you can go ahead.
Okay. I feel like with oh my god. I feel like
hard, it's
with
okay.
what Cassidy said, like doing things like music for me especially, it is me like feeling how I feel.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's an expression.
Yeah.
So I'm keeping myself busy and I have a goal and I'm working towards that. It makes me feel good. But like also just the process of like making music and doing that is a way for me to express like sadness in a healthier manner than sitting in bed for like a super long time, personally.
Yeah.
I think for me, I don't know, this kind of happens for me all the way through the recovery process or like grief process, is I like to leave nothing unsaid that I want to be heard. Like but this is only specifically like if a relationship ends in a way that I don't like or that I'm not very comfortable with, and that could be like either party, like maybe I did something wrong, maybe they did something that I didn't like. I just like expressing my emotions. Like I'll write it down and I'll write down everything that I wanted to say or I wish I could have said. And recently, in like the past couple of years in my relationships, I have been like, maybe like I'll send a letter and be angsty like that. Maybe I'll say it to their face, like whatever, because it kind of helps me grieve if I kind of just say, this is how I feel. And it's not always bad. It's not like bashing the person. It's just saying like, this is how I feel by what has happened and what our relationship meant to me. And here it all is. And if I leave nothing unsaid, then I feel like it just kind of helps me grieve. It kind of helps me, it allows myself to feel everything, but make my peace with it.
You go, Avery.
Okay. You go next.
And then 5:45.
Yeah, I gotta go. But
Thanks, Elliot.
Because I feel like the process of being, at least on the receiving end of getting broken up with, can feel very suffocating, as in, like, you might not get to say what's on your mind because, like, at least personally, you want to be, like, not the bigger person, but understand that they are completely valid for having their feelings of reasons of why they want to break up with you, and you can't really do anything about it, and you just kind of have to be like, okay, but that can feel very, like, because I would never want to, like, you would never want to say something that would feel like you're trying to sway their opinion or choice, and it can feel very, like, I never got to, like, say what I wanted to say, but I also don't want to say it because they've kind of said their piece and are done and are walking away, and I'm not trying to pull this back in and release a whole new wave of emotions. So getting, like, things, yeah, I like to write a lot, just, like, say what I think needs or needed to be said without, like, hurting others.
And I think it really does depend, like, with each individual circumstance. Like a relationship I was in that ended badly, I still have stuff that I want to say. So I wrote it down, and that's a message that I will send if I feel like that's what I need to heal. And that's that specific situation. That's not for everyone. That was because things were done to me that were not okay and that were not handled well. And so in this situation, I do have the right to, and it's not saying I hate you, it's just saying this is just what it is, you know? And I feel like, but for other situations, I think you can hurt somebody, or you can come across as if you're like, oh, like especially if it's so soon, being like, please take me back, or please, like, I regret my decision, please come back to me, you know? I think it just depends.
One way that I totally agree with writing everything down to get it out. I don't take the step to send it to them because I don't have the guts. But good for you, Emory. Really good for you. You're doing the work. But what I do, which is it's very our generation of me, I make a Snapchat story that nobody is on, and I pretend like they're on it. Or like I'll pretend like they can see it, and I just post everything I want to say to the Snapchat story. That way, it's gone in 24 hours. I don't have it forever to go back at and get sad at, because whenever I read like my old, like I used to write like sad poems and stuff. Whenever I read that, it makes me really sad again, which in a way I like, because it shows me that I did care. It was real. It happened, but I don't always like to feel sad, and so I think one way that I do cope with a loss or something, or having things that I want to say that I didn't get to, I just put it on a Snapchat story. Nobody can see it. Nobody's feelings are hurt. It's almost like I didn't actually feel the feelings, and now that I feel better, I'm fine with that, you know? Like, I don't need all the tiny little things to be heard, but it would have still been nice to tell them, so. I suggest y'all do that. It's really nice.
I just want to put stuff on my
I'm
main
getting back on
story.
Snapchat just for that
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah.
Yes. You got anything you also want to share with that?
I mean, I'm a journaler, just like as a general
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
So I mean, I'm always kind of writing down how I feel
Yeah.
and kind of doing check-ups on myself.
That's awesome.
So I mean, I guess having that kind of stuff logged and like you can look back at it can be, you know, messy for a while, but I think being able to look back at, you know, how you felt in a certain moment and reread it, you know, months later when you're feeling better and you're not like in that moment anymore, it's really nice because it's like a snapshot of who you were and where you were at, and you can look back and see how far you've come and, you know, the progress you've made in the time since, you know, you were feeling that and wrote all that down. And I think that's a really, really like liberating feeling to be able to know that you've improved so much and just see how far you've come, how many steps you've taken since then.
Wow.
It's definitely eye-opening, because especially when at the time you're feeling so like hurt and like, oh, how could they do this? But then you look back on it and you're like, Cassidy, like, that's really obvious. Like, they were treating you really bad.
I found a journal the other day, and I had written in it, because I'm a huge journaler too, and I had written in it like the day that I had gotten broken up with, and going back and reading it, I was almost laughing at myself. I was like, you really thought that, like, your world was ending.
Wow.
Right,
Like,
and now you're
like,
fine.
Like 16-year-old Oxford, Mississippi self thought that the world was ending because you're getting broken up with, and now I'm looking at it, I'm like, that is so cringy.
That's good. Well, I want to give anybody who wants kind of a final word, and then I'm going to wrap it up.
I feel like, I don't know, just like take your time and do what works for you, as long as you're not hurting anyone or hurting yourself, you know, and relationships are hard, and being vulnerable is really hard, but opening yourself up to love of any kind is still like such a huge thing that so many people struggle with, and you should be proud that you did it, and it might not have worked out the way you wanted to, but you still tried, and that there's really
Takes a lot of
something in that.
courage.
Yeah, there's a lot of courage, a lot of bravery. Yeah.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Well, that's kind of what I'm hearing from you guys, is the idea that we all have to kind of do our own work. And I love what y'all all shared about journaling. You know, I'm around people who believe that their life is worth thinking about and worth putting down on paper. And I love the fact that you journal, because when we journal, the story is allowed to play out. Our story is allowed to play out, and it can find itself, and it can rest, and become ready for the new relationship. And I love that. You can cultivate even from the past and say, oh, look at that relationship, like you were saying. Okay, maybe I want to do this different this time, or do it in a different way. So, wow, you know, congratulations, guys. Y'all are much further down the pike than I was at your age. I was usually burning journals. But yeah, so grateful for y'all. I'm grateful for you guys, and hope this has been helpful for you today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.